First, something a little different this morning. For Christians, this is Easter Sunday, and Jews this past week gathered with family and friends to mark Passover. It is a time when many not only reflect on their faith, but also commit themselves to charity and to helping others. So we begin this hour with a guest you came to know as a top aide to President Bush. Former White House Press Secretary Dana Perino is with us today, though, because of a choice she made as her time in government was coming to an end. Dana Perino, welcome to State of the Union. You decided, after leaving the rigors of the White House press room, to go to South Africa to volunteer in an HIV clinic. I want you to tell us why, and as you do, over your shoulder, we're going to show some of the video you brought back of the amazing children you met.
Well, thanks for having me on and for being willing to spend some time on your Sunday show where there's no shortage of political topics to talk about to shed some light on this. You know, over the years at the White House, you become kind of hardened, and I had felt that way a little bit, but it wasn't my true heart. And when we went to Africa in February of 2008 with President Bush, I realized that this is what I want to do. I want to come back and try to help in some small way. I actually think that the work that I did really only helped them in a very small way. But if I can come back and shed some light and have some put some amplification on what we are doing as Americans all around the world. There are Americans of all different stripes, and some with Christian groups, some with Islamic groups, some with Jewish groups, out working with NGOs and governments all around the world to try to help in any way that we can. And
turn over your shoulder as we speak. You can see some of the children here. This is your video that you brought back. Tell us about meeting these young children who come from families where their parents, and I assume some of these children, have HIV.
Well, these are children who live in a township called Masifumaleli, and I didn't really know a lot about townships and how that had really, I had never seen it and witnessed it. Of course, read about it in books, and you can see it on TV, but it's something different when you see it in person. And these children were at a kids club, which is something they do between the hours of 3 and 5 every day through Living Hope. That's the group that I went and volunteered with. And they give a little warm-up exercise. I remember this little kid here in the jersey. He was very proud of his Ronaldo shirt because obviously soccer is very important. But they were basically getting taken care of. They get a snack every day, which in some cases was the most nutrition that they got in any day. And it's all by Living Hope, which 52% of the funding for Living Hope comes from the American taxpayer. So I wanted to see for myself, what are we really doing and how is it working? And I can tell you, I just want to make sure every American knows that it's a bipartisan program now, started by President Bush, but embraced by everybody. And the work that we're doing is really good, and we should be proud of it.
Let's get up and walk over the wall for a minute, because before we talk more about your experience, I want to put the HIV crisis in context. The map, this is a map of the world, and the lighter colors mean lower incidence of HIV. You see 5,000 cases. The brighter colors, orange and red, mean a higher incidence. You see the United States here. There's between 1 million and 5 million cases in the United States. And I want to swing the map around because this is where you were. And you see, obviously, the biggest problem is in Africa, in the continent of Africa. And I want to zoom in a little closer here where you were down in South Africa and bring it up on the screen. 5.7 million cases. That's 18% of the population. Higher over in tiny Swaziland, 26% of the population. But 5.7 million cases. Now, the PEPFAR program, the President's Emergency Program, the UN says it has stabilized people, but not so much in the new incidence of the disease. What is the next key step in your group in terms of making these numbers go down?
Well, one thing that happened when President Bush took over in 2001, 50,000 people on the entire continent of Africa were getting antiretroviral treatment. Okay, he started the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. It's called PEPFAR. Now that's 2.2 million people around the world that are getting this treatment. Most of them are in Africa. The key to any type of poverty eradication is education. And in this case, it's not only education for those youngsters to be able to get jobs, but prevention. And prevention is the next step. And I think that obviously there's a lot of need. If you imagine that 18 out of 100 people that you meet almost had a death sentence. Now they're able to maybe live longer, not necessarily in the rural areas, but it's because of our generosity and working with NGOs and, in some cases, the United Nations, they were able to help save lives. But then how do you make their lives better? And that's the next step.
When you were going on this trip and you told me about it, I begged you to take a camera. And I want, as we sit back down and continue our conversation, for our viewers to meet your new friend, Kumi.
Yes.
I was very, very sick at that time. My children were in foster care. And now with the sewing, I could see that now I can really be able to support my children with the money that I make from the sewing.
And how many women do you have sewing for you?
I've got 8 women and
so,
1 man.
Do they make enough money to help support themselves and their families.
It does really make a difference in their lives.
How did this whole thing get started?
At night, I would practice sewing. When other patients are sleeping, I would be sewing.
Tell me a little bit about what you've made here.
This is the original bag of the peacock. The text says, Partners for Hope. Evangeline Ministries is a non-profit mission helping South African women who live with HIV and AIDS to enrich their lives by developing skills that make them self-sufficient.
You have with you some of the products from this.
I do.
And we're not in the endorsement business here or the advertising business, but how important is that self-sufficiency to these people who, as you mentioned before, had a death sentence?
Well, it's critical because a lot of these people have no way to make a living. And Kumi, what she doesn't talk about in the video, in that soundbite, is she was on her deathbed in 2006. She's 34 years old at the time, is the mother of 2 sets of twins, and was basically had no way to support herself or her children. So she had to take the older set of twins and take them to family out in a rural area, in the northern area, and then find some place where someone could take care of her babies, because she was about 10 days away from death. And she says to me that the doctor leaned over her at Living Hope. Basically, she had gone there to die, and said to her, "We just got some medicines from America, and you're going to make it." And she said she didn't believe him at the time.
And then she was taught to do these bags. And I do have the original peacock bag, actually. And I have to tell you, I'm a connoisseur of bags. I'm trying to find the best one. But it has pockets on this side, and they've got cute little wooden buttons.
But you heard what she said. She has figured out a way to help other women learn how to sew in order to help take care of themselves and to be able to provide for their families. And you can't put a price tag on that. The one thing I think is great, you saw the study this week from Stanford saying that President Bush's program had saved over 1 million lives. But you don't know from that, and that's just through 2006, so we don't know what the numbers are in the past 2 years. But what it doesn't talk about is the ripple effect of what we're doing. If you help Kumi and she helps 8 women, then how many other people is that helping? And so if we can keep these programs going and focus on the good work that Americans do and be really proud of ourselves and not apologize wherever we go, I think that I think that we can do even greater work.
It is remarkable and inspiring. I'm going to make an awkward twist because I can't let you leave without a little bit of political commentary from Dana Perino.